I appreciate it's still Monday morning. So I will be rattling through my talk about premium to free to play. Actually, it's more about premium to, I suppose, games as a service rather than specifically free to play. Now this talk, I've done some of this before, and it's been about an hour, so I'm going to be rattling through relatively quickly. But I've been looking at what's the main highlights that I'm sure you'll watch out of this, and have edited it as well. So that's not doing anything. There you go. Video first. No sound. Anyway, this is our wonderful game that we're currently I'm going to be talking a lot about. This is Fractured Space. It's paused now as well. So I'll just
this won't be your fate. You have been selected from the best minds we have. You will take a charge of one of the most advanced spacecraft ever assembled as part of an elite fleet.
I saw you.
Objectives. Strategy is the key to any successful engagement. First, know your enemy. If he specializes a light or medium attack, assess your opponent's strengths,
Rather than looking at a slideshow,
and threat level. Commanders of heavy cruisers should move into position to use heavy siege to hostiles while overcoming firepower. Those of you pilots of aircraft must
Technology, amazing. Right, all the same, all around the world. Okay, so I've got my, I'll cut this really short because there's no way here to hear who I am. Basically, I've been making games for quite a while, but the important thing is that, you know, for most of my career, I was in making, I suppose, mostly work for hire games, putting them in boxes, and the later part of that, doing digital distribution games, but still with a clear end date, a final delivery, maybe with some DLC, but nothing like games as a service. But as Edge Case Games, that's all changed because that was our concentration. So Edge Case Games, put a tiny bit of background on that. So in Guildford, we're 35 people. We're quite a senior bunch of people. A lot of the guys I've taken along have been actually working with me for a very long time, since the early 2000s probably. We've grown over the last few years, and I'll talk about that. Again, we came a lot from the, I suppose, PC console space, in fact. We were previously making Strike Suit Zero under the name Already Game, if you look us up. But again, nearly all my team, all their background, even the ones we're recruiting today, they pretty much all come from the premium space, I should say. Okay, so I won't go into depth about the game itself. I would have said the video has spoken lots of words about it, but anyway, it is a PC, I suppose almost like the early elevator pitch was World of Tanks beats League of Legends in space. And I think we've delivered on that in lots of ways. We've evolved it over the last couple of years. But it's a space-based combat game, big capital ships, duking it out, and it's lots of fun. Okay. I'll let this video run.
There's no diplomacy, no governments, just the sectors they pay us to fight for. They won't call it a war, but our people and theirs die just the same.
we were born ready games, we created edge case games. We actually launched Fractured Space into early access on Steam, very early access. If you look back at the original videos, what we did, we actually went to market after about 3 or 4 months of development. We've concentrated mainly on North America and the UK, it's English only at the moment. In the early days, what did we do? We did free weekends, monthly updates, lots and lots of hot fixes. We increased the studio size, so we started off at the beginning of Edge Case Games around about 16 people, and we're now about 35, as you saw. We actually it wasn't until quite a bit later on we added things like the in-game shop, things you'd expect from games as a service or a free-to-play model. It wasn't actually free at the beginning either. We actually ran out from early access as a $10 paid experience. It wasn't until May 2016 that we added some of the other things you'd expect, like adding gacha, loot boxes, and we actually went free-to-play then. And then we went in September of 2016, we actually did a launch, and we felt like we had a lot more of the experience in place. Oh, how we've learned since that we've actually had a lot more to go, way beyond that initial phase. And we're still learning, okay. So some things that we think we did right, okay, before I go into the learning things. So we really concentrated on our core gameplay. Again, we wanted to make sure a game was at its very core, which it still is today, and it's improving all the time. People would have fun playing it. They would have fun playing it again and again and again. Because you're not making a game that's going to be played a few times. You're making a game that's going to be played thousands and thousands of times. Some of our main game players have played non-stop since November 2014. We can see the unbelievable statistics in our core players. We wanted to prove it, we wanted to test the fun, so we actually got people in, they played the game, and then we iterated it. I've got to remember, I'm going to go quick. We shared the core game early with partners, with friends, and really honed that core experience. The other thing we did was we decided early on to really embrace open development. We worked very closely with our community, right from the very beginning. So we had a community manager on board, and now we have actually a community management team, and everybody on the team works very closely with our community. We really believe in that. There's lots I could talk about open development. It's almost another talk in its own right. And we really dived in with huge amounts of enthusiasm across the team. Everybody was enthusiastic for this big change, pretty much. We designed with esports in mind, but that's not a big part of what we did. It just means that we made sure that if any way that people want to do tournaments, they want to run the game as in a tournamented way, or take it to another layer, they can do. And the other thing that's really important, what we did right, was really think about our metrics. At the very beginning, we really care about metrics. We really care about that mixture of game design, psychology, and science. And the science part of the metrics, if you're going to do this, you have to have them in, you have to have an early stage. There's lots more I can talk about as well. Again, I have to zoom along. So things that we would do differently. Funnily enough, at the beginning I said lots of core game focus. We potentially over-focused a little bit. We could have ramped that down and spent a little bit more time thinking about the meta game. Because actually, even if you have a great core experience, there are other really important pillars to what you'll need to basically get your players in and staying and playing all the time. So if you look at our Steam reviews, over Christmas we were around about 90% Steam reviews. We were up there. People really, once they get into the game, they love it. But they've got to get into the game, and then of course they've got to stay. So actually, could we have taken a little bit of a hit on our core game experience and spent a bit of elsewhere? Probably. So the next one is the complex game mode. So actually, the other thing is that potentially with a slightly simpler game mode, and a slightly simpler game in itself, and all the different parts you need there, we would have had to do less of what we've done a lot over this last period of time, which is to explain the game so that when people come in, they understand. So that's all about, as you can imagine, the tutorial, that first user experience. And this is probably one of the biggest ones for anybody who's thinking about going from that world, taking a team to a real live game over a speed at which you develop. So we weren't ready for this at all. We thought that for a size of game with very similar experience, we might have said, okay, well, it's going to take 18 months to deliver this game design. Actually, I would say that we've roughly worked out, and I think a lot of other people have said this as well, maybe around about a quarter of your development speed. Now, some people say a third, some people are very optimistic and say half speed, but actually you work a lot slower rate as a development team when you've got a live game out there to support. You've got new features you want to put in, but you've got to support the previous features, and you've got a reactive community, and you've got bugs that are arriving, and your engine needs updating. All these things mean that you will work at a much slower rate. So if you're moving from the model where you've done something that's been a chunk of work for hire, if you're going to move to a game that's going to last for years, expect to work much slower. Hypervised meta, that's a bit more of a complex one, but basically when we first built our game, we looked at different ways of doing meta games. We probably, what we did, actually mix and match a bit, which meant we had to change and learn as we went. Again, there's lots I can talk about another track, maybe another day, or you can ask me afterwards. Recruiting experts. Now, this is something that, again, what we would do differently. We would definitely bring in more experts earlier. And even though we were doing some of that, I think even still, there's more we could have learned. Moving from our previous model and our previous lives and what we've learned for the previous 15 to 20 years, bringing in people who've done it, right? That's really important. Be prepared for a bigger UI team than you may be used to as well, because all these changes, all this chopping and changing you've got to do, it will have an impact on your UI. Most of it is in the UI, in fact, so be prepared for having a bigger UI team than you may have been used to in the past. And then being under a lot of strain. Not be so generous. I think there's lots of ways we played with our economy. Maybe we could have been a little bit less generous at times, maybe a bit more generous at times. In fact, when we put the gadget in, we could have changed some of that. So there's different things we could have been doing there. Metrics and immediately, even though we knew the power, we knew that we wanted to put this science part of our game in there, we actually didn't put it in for quite some time, or what we had in there was too weak. And it took quite a while until we really had a decent set of metrics coming out of our game. So when we went early with a free weekend on Steam, we really didn't have much data coming out of that. So an enormous amount of people we burned through and really didn't learn that much, apart from they seem to have gone, but we don't know why. So we didn't learn that much from that. We knew that one of the things, which is the bottom one, at that point we really weren't explaining the game. We assumed that most people would understand our game, but actually the lack of a decent first-time user experience, decent tutorial, metrics, meant that in those early days we weren't learning anywhere near as much as we should have been moving into this new space. So another thing I think is bringing in somebody who is quite often called a product manager these days. So I think a lot of people in the mobile world, which many of you may well be, would say, yeah, we know all this. This is the kind of stuff that we do. We have somebody whose head is really focused around not just the game, or not just game design, or a relationship with the publisher or something like that. It's actually more about the customer experience, thinking about the customer experience and how that feeds into all of the aspects, not just the building of the game, but the metagame, the user experience, the community, all these kind of areas. So I think bringing somebody like that could have made a big difference. So one of the things which most of us are is potentially being cash constrained. So a lot of the things that we did early on in terms of maybe even putting in our gacha mechanic, our loot drops, is we actually rushed and put these things in very quickly because you're cash constrained. You put them in, you think, okay, this is great, it's going to make us some money. Yes, it might, but maybe just wait a little bit longer until you refined it, because actually that's probably when we took our biggest review score hit, was when we put in the gacha system and it wasn't quite right, and we hadn't quite thought through some of the ramifications. So really think about these things when you're going to go and put them in, and again, wouldn't it be good to have a bit more time sometimes? That's just not life. So focusing on retention features, we're still getting there with that. All this time later, we've got retention features in. There are more coming. In fact, this coming up in March, we're putting in some big new elements of the game, which should improve our metrics. It's not that our metrics are bad; they need to be better. They can be better. So thinking about those retention features from an early day is really important. Of course, that comes into your meta. Those things could be many different things you could do to really engage and hold on to people. Social systems. Again, very similar to talking about meta. Again, this is one of the things of going early, is that you can go out there without social and go, well, it doesn't matter too much, we don't have some of the social elements, but actually it's really important to get those in there. I'm being told to speed along. Player observance, watching people play your game, we could have done more of that, we're doing more of that, we can do more again. And then one of the other elements of it is if you are self-publishing, which is what we do, then you need to bring in more people who are around the publishing side of the business. And in fact, we were doing it very much in an indie way, but now we've got a marketing director who really understands this, and has taken things to a whole new level, and it's been fantastic. And then when you're starting to talk about real customer acquisition campaigns, which is part of our 2018, those people, you need those experts in. I've said it before, again, or before at the beginning, early access, we went really early, honestly. If you can find any videos of us first out, you'll see how early we went and how ropey things were. That was part of our plan, as part of the cash constraint, but I think even that early is probably too early for your community, even though a lot of people from that day have stuck with us. I think that we just could have taken a little bit longer to get to that point to really hold on to people. Stage releases early on, there's some interesting things that people have done, which I think that we could have done, is that actually one of the things I'm very, very proud of, the team are very proud of, is that since November 2014, we've had constant matches, constantly playing all this time. We've never dropped down to a CCD level at which people think you're dead. That's over a really long period of time with like almost no marketing being spent whatsoever. We've managed to keep games going, players playing all this time. One of the things in the earliest days, is one of the things I've seen some people do is they say the game's only available on Saturday. Things like that. Just in your early days, just to learn a little bit more and not have the pure fear and panic of the game not being alive for Wednesday afternoon or a rainy Monday morning, which is when I'm not there. Oh my God, we're really worried about this thing. And in the early days, that drove some of our behaviour, which wasn't necessarily ideal or optimal. More experimentation. I think it would be great to spend more time playing around with different aspects of your game as almost like a separate team who can try and get some experiments, get them into the community, then get them background into the game. I think as we grow, we'll be able to do more of that, but it maybe is just one of those things that's a bit more of a luxury. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm really doing reasonably well, I think. A lot of things that we'd like to have done, funnily enough, require more people. More people is more money, or more money will get you more people. That's a big part of what we wanted to do. However, some of the ways you could look at it is that actually, if you had that luxury, you might have made very different decisions, and maybe just worked in isolation on a product like we did in the past, and released something that was very wrong, as opposed to iterating, learning, being very focused, being very hungry, and making some of those hard decisions with your game. Of course, we all like a bit more cash to make what we want to make, but maybe it's good to be lean as well. Okay, that's a super fast version of a myriad of things I could tell you. If you want to talk to me,